If Waco taught us anything, it's that the American government just wants what's best for us. This is Inverted World Live. The American government is my favorite serial killer. It's a big death cult, and they're just fighting other cults all the time. How was your Easter, Alex?
It was good. Here we are.
Yeah.
We made it.
Sorry we're late, guys. We had some technical issues. There was a chicken eating our wire.
You know how it
there was
goes
a
around
fish
here.
in the percolator.
Yeah.
There were gremlins and all. We just, Zoom hates us.
Yeah, no, there's always a little something.
So sorry about that. But yeah, we were listening to, what did we title this episode?
Oh, we didn't start the fire?
Yeah, because we're going to talk about Waco today.
Yeah.
And that song by Billy Joel, I think is predictive programming. Billy Joel knew ahead of time that what was going to happen in the early 90s. So he wrote a song about it. It's a great song. You're from Long Island. So
From Long Island.
There's statues, I imagine, of Billy Joel just all over the place.
Oh, yeah, it's who we pray to at night, you know?
Great.
No, it's like if you're from Long Island, if you're from Long Island and you don't like Billy Joel, it's like, get out of here.
Oh, man. Yeah, so anything crazy happened to you this week? You're all...
No, I've been going down this viral story, though, on TikTok I told you about.
Oh,
this
yeah.
Arizona couple that found, they're like living off-grid in Arizona, like 15 miles from the border, and they found like children backpacks that are filled with clothes and
I think it's
toothpaste
real.
and, you know, someone was skeptical of it. I mean, as you should be, right? Some people are skeptical. I mean, their TikTok was taken down though recently, so that's something. And
By, like, their TikTok was taken down?
yeah, their TikTok's been taken down, so now they're on YouTube, and it's like, are they just trying to get views? But like, why would you set this whole thing up? I just like don't understand people anymore.
I mean, why do people do it? People kill themselves by accident taking selfies on cliffs.
Yeah, that's
just
crazy.
for clicks, you know? There was that story about a year or two ago of a lady claiming they found a body in her yard. I don't know what happened with that story, but I feel like that was also some sort of hoax. And this one, when you sent me that link, I'm like, this sounds a lot like that girl.
Oh, okay, it could be.
But it might be real. They find bodies everywhere in America is a graveyard.
Yeah.
So it's very possible.
Well, people are just like, you want to live, you know, off grid, but now you're on social media, like streaming live, all this stuff, and it's like interesting. And then one guy was like, I looked into this guy, and he's like on the run. But at the same time, it's all kind of bizarre. Like, where would they? What did they do? They got bones on Amazon, and they're like, "This is a femur bone of a child."
Yeah.
Just to like get clicks.
Yeah,
so I
perhaps.
guess it's kind of like.
That actually sounds like a good idea. I'll be doing that this week. TikTok. I found these bones in my yard, everybody. But yeah, we were gone last week for Easter.
Right.
I went and recorded a really fun podcast with Danny Jones. That was fun.
Cool.
And I think that airs soon. And on my way back, the plane was about to land. It was super turbulent. And right as the wheels touched the runway, we flew right back up into the sky. Has that ever happened to you?
I saw that in the news. I was like, "They're shame."
That was terrifying. I don't like flying to begin with because I just don't like. I don't trust anything.
You know, you really shouldn't be
Amish.
in a car.
I'm Amish.
Yeah, you really are Amish.
But it took right back up into the sky, and then we were just doing a giant U-turn in the air.
Fun.
I was like, and there was a kid throwing up next to me.
Oh, great.
And the father was next to the kid, juggling two of his other kids. So it was like, man, I'm never flying again. I'm only taking, like, I got Jose here in Austin. We were talking about Bohemian Grove, which I'm going to be at in I think in June, and they're talking about flying down. I'm like, I might have to take a horse and carriage.
See you in a year.
Can I Uber a horse and carriage?
Maybe you
I'm gonna hit up top about that.
You know what?
We can
That could
supply
be
a horse and carriage.
something you could do for your future. There, start a whole new company.
Amish Uber.
Yeah.
That's sick. Well, with that in mind, let's bring on our awesome guests. I'm sorry to keep them waiting. Let's bring on Jose and Austin.
I'm a little scared though. Okay.
Yeah. So guys watching out there, Zoom is giving us lots of issues. So we've done this like conspiratorial Brady Bunch smash up of both of them in one screen. So I'm very sorry for those watching, but I think you guys look great.
I might have to be here to stay. Usually I just kind of hide in my corner over here.
How are you guys?
I'm sorry. Say that again. You cut out. I couldn't.
I was asking how you're doing.
Oh, we're doing good. Doing great.
Good.
We just got, me and Austin just got back. I think I've just finally settled back in at home. Me and Austin took a little trip out to Vegas recently. We went over to hang out with Jake Shields, Sam Tripoli. We went to LA and then to Vegas. Did Jake Shields show, recorded a couple episodes. One just dropped.
It's amazing.
So we're kind of riding high right now. Been hanging out with Jake, just riding high in anti-Semitism and having a fun time,
Is that what you took to get to Vegas? Just flying anti-Semitism right into Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's probably better than
It
United
is.
Airlines these days. As if I did not trust that airplane. That airplane I took, that I was just saying, like landed and took back off. Before we took off from Florida, they were like, "Oh wait, we got to like tape up parts of this plane because it had." And their words were gouge. They had gouges in the plane. I'm like, I don't know if I want to be on this plane. So okay, guys, we're here to talk about lots of things. We're going to talk about Waco. We just had the anniversary about a week ago. Why should the American people trust the American government? I like the silence.
You want to start out, Jose?
Yeah, I mean, well, they generally are on the up and up with most things. They kind of come clean when they make mistakes. So I mean, that's kind of. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, what we're doing here at all, really.
Right.
I mean, generally speaking, the official narrative is about as far as you need to look into it.
Exactly.
But yeah, so that's why, yeah, particularly, and they don't really ever lie to us, and they're pretty straightforward. Sometimes it'll take about 30 years to get the truth, but we'll get it eventually, you know.
That's a great answer.
Right.
Sounds about right. Wikipedia is a great source. Any .gov website is a great source. Fauci, you know, all these people, they want what's best for you. I totally believe them. So when it comes to Waco, it seems like this was just a crazed death cult that wanted to harm everybody and take over the government. Am I right?
Man, honestly, I use Waco as the best example for what kind of spotlighting what your government is capable of, you know, and for me, really it was Ruby Ridge, Waco, and OKC that dropped the red pill and kind of like effectively removed the veil of naivete as far as just my conceptual understanding of the threat we truly face as a domestic citizenry. You know, I just think that if our ultimate role is to hold the state accountable, then we are failing miserably. And I think Waco is the best example of that, because they will not think twice before driving a tank through your front door and you know
Literally.
shooting you, your children, and your dog.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
they won't.
mentioned Ruby Ridge, Waco, OKC. Those all happened. Like Ruby Ridge was like the year before Waco,
6
right?
months before. 6 months
6 months
before.
before.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating because you had, like, for example, Lon Horiuchi, the sniper sent from Quantico, Virginia, right, with the elite team of snipers to Ruby Ridge that day. He was the one responsible for shooting Vicky Weaver, the wife of Randy Weaver, while she was holding her newborn child in her
Insane.
arms,
Insane.
and considered to be the priority target, according to former Green Beret commander, Bo Gritz, who's a very interesting character himself and has a lot to say about Jonestown as well. But yeah, it very much seems like you kind of take a step back and look at 6 months after the fact, the very exact same sniper who effectively I mean targeted Vicky Weaver and clearly pulled the trigger on the death shot, was then, of course, responsible for having confirmed kills at Waco 6 months later.
That's crazy.
You know,
It's crazy to
yeah,
think
it's
about
nuts.
how America, like just like the average American citizen, was thinking about all this in that time. You know, it's like how I remember growing up, the news reporting on a shark attack, and all of a sudden there was like lots of shark attacks. And now, you know, these early '90s, these huge standoffs are happening, and I'm sure the American people are just the majority of them are eating up all the mainstream media about however they're portraying the Weavers or the Davidians. So it's fascinating to think that it's just 6 months time had passed between that and then what happens at Waco. It's crazy.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, and then 2 years from there, then it's OKC. But go on,
Yeah,
Austin.
exactly.
Yeah, that's insane. So for those who don't know, can you walk us through how Waco started and what brought us to Waco?
Absolutely. Yeah, I honestly think that it's important to understand that there was clearly a covert operation that was going on surrounding the Branch Davidians and specifically David Koresh. And the ATF, they were very much in a position where they needed good publicity, right? And I always found that fascinating and important to point out, right, is that seemingly this occurred due to just due to the self-licking ice cream cone that truly is the state, right? And kind of like it's very much important to understand like the mindset overall, conceptually what was playing out. And I think that when you kind of like study Waco at a deeper level and you realize that, you know, it really only ushered through this subconscious facilitation of the current paradigm and the continued growth of the state in the first place. That was kind of the inherent consequence of right. It's the problem reaction solution of it all, and in the end, you can blame it on some crazed, maniacal, essentially, what David Koresh was very much labeled as was sort of in the same framework as a Charles Manson was kind of a lot of what they would try to compare him to,
Can you
which in
say,
itself is
sorry, can you say why the ATF needed like a PR boost at that time?
yeah. Let me honestly, it's what I find the most important is that again, it's like what was happening at the time though, because here's what Henry Ruth, who was the essentially what you have to know is he's one of three of the independent reviewers who was sent from the US Treasury Department and testified during the congressional inquiry following the ATF siege of the Branch Davidian complex in Waco. And he says that the ATF needed good publicity. With its appropriations hearings a week away, a successful raid this size would produce major positive headlines to counter the ATF's reputation as a rogue agency whose debacles blackened the reputations of other agencies, and it would scare the public enough about fringe groups to create political pressure on Congress to increase its budget. And you combine that obvious, just again, what truly is, the inevitable motivation here. It's like a layered operation because it seems to, of course, achieve multiple objectives that are playing out, and that makes sense the way that these agencies consistently operate. There seem to be very much overlapping agendas playing out in certain ways, where certain groups are read in on the ultimate. But it's very much compartmentalized. But the point being is that when you factor in the conceptual outline of PatCon, which was a huge part of what was happening in regards to these right-wing militia groups, as well as just kind of staging this, you know, really just this managing perception in this moment, yeah, I think is a key factor in kind of paving the way for the total information awareness and the new mass surveillance state. I mean, it really did all kind of hinge from this original PatCon, which PatCon itself, Patriot Conspiracy, as an acronym, it very much kind of in my mind dovetails. It's the extension of COINTELPRO, right? It was essentially COINTELPRO's targeting left-wing movements, left-wing organizations,
Right.
infiltrating them, if not creating them out of whole cloth to essentially, create culture and socially engineer the public. Um, and also have people consistently buy back into the two-party delusion in my mind, which very much plays out on a daily basis to kind of reinforce these false narratives and misconceptions to where we fall back into the trap of the permanent establishment narrative that's always, again, moving in the dystopian direction that we continue to consistently remain on this same path, despite who we're allowed to vote for, is kind of what just kind of my personal opinion and mentality and perspective on it. But that doesn't really matter. The point being is that Patriot Conspiracy itself is important for everyone to understand what your government agents are doing with your taxpayer dollars is targeting you individually wherever you land on the political spectrum ideologically. It is a part of ideological subversion, in the most sophisticated, really, kind of really in the best.
To put it in perspective real quick, Austin, I was talking to Ken Silva just recently, and we have an episode will be dropping on Monday that's kind of talking about Carol Howe, who just recently died. And we were talking through it, and we just kind of were like, it dawned on me as we're talking about PatCon, which, as you mentioned, it was the right-wing version of it. This is stuff that was revealed, the right-wing version of COINTELPRO. This is stuff that was revealed, in the court, essentially the crusade of Jesse Trentadue, who is someone connected to the Oklahoma City bombing. But anyways, essentially there is and I believe there's going to be in a book coming up, Margaret Roberts' book coming out soon in July on the Oklahoma City bombing. I believe this will have this specific factoid, but there is a reason to believe, at the very least, a source upcoming, that PatCon may have played a part in Waco, which that has been kind of something that's been claimed for a long period of time by John Matthews, who is one of the individuals who came out and court or legal or FBI documents and stuff have come out that confirmed it, and he also himself confirmed he was a PatCon operative. And
when you say PatCon being involved, do you mean like they infiltrated the Branch Davidians?
Well, the rumor for a long time is that they were concerned that there was going to be a resupply or an ammo resupply or some sort of militia or something of the like that were essentially was going to come to help them. And that was what made the big push there at the end to kind of go in and sweep things up, was when that was a concern. But now if you understand how PatCon operated, it was kind of, they would have these given assets that would kind of almost be attach a certain level of criminality to themselves while having kind of being a cutout from the government. So it's like they're attaching a level of criminality, which then attacks the larger group they're into to criminality, whether that be true to what one degree or another. It just gives an easy precedent for the feds to move upon.
Of course.
And so there's reason to believe that perhaps there's something to that. And I believe we probably talked about this the last time I came on your show to talk about Oklahoma City bombing. There is very strong reason to believe that Timothy McVeigh himself may have been some sort of sheep-dipped government operative. Sounds crazy. There are literal letter he sent to his sister. He also said this to his first public defenders, that he was essentially doing black ops operation for the government. That when he went to special forces, which is with the official narrative, instead of actually finishing. The official narrative was that he failed due to some sort of foot, knee, or something. I forget, some minor injury.
Right.
Which in special forces that would take you out, a minor injury. But anyways, what he told his public defenders and his sister and his mother and likely probably his grandfather, although he died later, so it can't be confirmed, is that he was working for the government. And once again, these are the letters. There's all sorts of things that prove he said this. Now he's the source, so it's like he could be lying.
Right.
Who knows? Could be just some crazy loon. But given the role that he plays in history, I think there's a level of credibility to it.
Right. And we know that they do this sort of thing a lot. It's not like a one-off situation. And we know, I've seen stories about feds, I guess, being undercover within the Branch Davidians. What I was going to say, Austin, while you were, kind of giving us.
Sorry, Shane. I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to get the point I was getting at. Timothy McVeigh was at Waco. It literally could. There is a possibility. It's not outside the realm of possibility that Timothy McVeigh could have played a part in what caused it to go live, big time there at the end. So it is just wild how these things all interconnect, because he was at Waco. He likely was some sort of government operative. PatCon played a part. It's not all that crazy that he likely was part of PatCon, because PatCon was a joint task force. So there were other parts. He was part of the Guard as well. So that's really getting into the weeds. I would recommend people read Wendy Painting's book on this. Just the idea of that him being Guard made him more likely to be part of PatCon.
When you say he was at Waco,
being a domestic component as opposed to being a military, which is supposed to be foreign. So.
When you say McVeigh was at Waco, can you tell us what that means?
Well, this is where, as I mentioned, he was he was a black ops guy. It's so what he said is he was supposed to go out and make a legend for himself. And so if you do follow his life story, he was meeting with kind of all the major leaders of all the dissident right type groups,
right.
Kind of, getting his face out there, making a legend for himself, kind of being a dissatisfied veteran or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's video of him at Waco selling, essentially anti-government wares at Waco. So he's literally at Waco, because that was people were it was a camp out for militia right-wing types. Yeah. It was kind of a little party, kind of hey, what's going on here? And yeah, he was there.
Interesting. And
I believe there's reason to believe he may have been at Ruby Ridge, I think, but I don't think that's confirmed. I'm pretty sure, but Waco's there's video.
That would be crazy if he's at all three, the trifecta. What I was going to say is, leading up to the raid, what do you know what the local sentiment was about the Branch Davidians? Because they're portrayed as crazy people. I don't believe they were. I mean, Koresh was doing things I think were crazy, but I don't think they were as deranged as the media was portraying them. Is that like, what's your
Right.
takeaway?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The local police chief himself was, consistently defending them in every way. You had locals who were claiming that, the representation they were receiving in the media spotlight was completely inverted in
Mm,
terms of how they conducted themselves throughout the community. They were very much in good standing, high standing in the community itself. The locals in no way, just, occasional kind of like in a Randy Weaver sort of way where you might have issues with, let's say, a neighbor who has an issue with property rights of some kind, which definitely played a role in Randy Weaver's situation because that man was legitimately insane and wrote a bunch of letters claiming that Randy Weaver was going to assassinate the Pope and the president and all this crazy stuff. So it inevitably kind of led to a lot of the pretext that the feds utilized to kind of like stage the raid in the first place. But it was similar in the way that David Koresh was essentially kind of, as far as like allegedly prioritized and targeted, was due to the fact that there was like automatic gunfire that was heard on the property,
right.
right, from some neighbor who then reported it, and then there is allegedly you know, obviously the raid itself was February 28th, 93. But yeah, honestly, it's like what really happened to kind of stage this was that the search warrant, how it was obtained, was because of this suspicion of the Branch Davidians modifying their weapons to have this automatic fire capability. And so that all came and stemmed from this claim that Koresh had purchased these kits with M16 lower receiver parts,
Mm,
which I do think is important because again, it's clearly just a kind of a tax loophole in a way that the state and feds violate, and infringe upon your inherent rights. And so this alone is a kind of infringement upon the Second Amendment itself. And so the ATF allegations being that David could have been combining, could have been. So this was later on even acknowledged as not being you know, um, any sort of as far as like the status quo legitimized process of how you would go through conducting
right.
some sort of search warrant, or obtaining some sort of search warrant. You can't obtain a search warrant on allegations that David could have been combining M16 trigger components with a modified AR-15 lower receiver, which is apparently, according to ATF regulations, allegedly constructive possession of an unregistered machine gun without paying the $200 tax for legality. So it's exactly what they did to it really is effectively the same playbook they used on Randy Weaver 6 months earlier when they had a federal informant who was an operative himself and legitimately not only an asset, was an actual agent who was essentially sewing himself into the inner circle of Randy Weaver over time. And then finally, he convinces him to sell him a sawed-off shotgun. I believe it was two sawed-off shotguns. And so he goes to actually cut the barrel of the gun, and he begins to cut it at the legal limit.
Mm.
And I think it was an eighth of an inch or something that the Fed said, actually, no, cut it up,
Ridiculous.
put it right here.
That's
And Randy
ridiculous.
fucking did it for his buddy.
Right. Right.
And it's just like the
They're
craziest
just
thing
looking for
ever.
they're looking for any way to get you. If they don't have the thing they need, they will make it happen. And that happens throughout history. Before we get to like the fire, the raid, all that stuff, I do think it's important. I don't know how many people who listen know like all about Waco because it's like one of those words that you just know like it's something bad happened there. But I feel like a lot of it's just become watered down. And like, can you tell us who were the Branch Davidians? And then we'll get into Koresh because he's pretty fascinating, dude.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and keep in mind, as I said, Branch Davidians very much considered to be cordial with everyone in the surrounding community and seemingly in very high regard, but they were living a very unorthodox way of life. I mean, that is obviously
Hmm.
undeniable, but it was originally a splinter group from the Seventh-day Adventists and had come to believe that essentially David Koresh was effectively the Lamb, meaning that he would precede the second coming of Jesus Christ as told in the book of Revelation.
Hmm.
And so, in addition to him being the group's spiritual leader, he also assumed the burden of sex for the male Davidians. So this is where you get a lot of the, controversy,
The
and
burden of
especially
sex.
because,
So no one else can have sex but Koresh,
yeah,
right?
yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Crazy.
he was allowed Only he was allowed to sleep with the female members. And it didn't stop there either. He also took multiple wives, so he's practicing polygamy, and one even as young as 14 years old,
Yeah, it's
allegedly.
crazy.
And yeah, and so um, now, at the time, and I hate making this argument, it's not any sort of defense for the immoral aspect of what's playing out here, but to understand the legality of the the contextual understanding of kind of how this played out in a legal way. Um, Obviously, technically, under Texas law at this time, it was actually legal,
Yeah,
right?
14 was like the age of consent in Texas.
Exactly.
Is it still that? Do you know if it's still that age right now?
I'm not sure.
I hope not.
I'd be concerned if you knew that offhand.
Yeah, I know, right? But no, I know that I always trace a lot of these. I trace a lot of these elite pedophile networks back to essentially they flee to the Netherlands, which have very
Oh, wow.
young age of consent laws.
Oh, wow.
17 now.
Even when it is illegal, it's a slap on the wrist.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's
And
crazy.
essentially, even at like 16 or below, it's up to the parent or specifically the guardian themselves to report the abuse. It's like some strange
Wow.
pedophile loophole that's playing out internationally. That's
Real quick, I
providing
did want to
some-
make a mention. I do feel like you brought the legal, but even that aside, even if it is illegal, it does no one any benefit to kill the victim. So bear that in mind.
Oh,
Right.
So
no,
it's
yeah,
like,
no.
Right.
like cool, you killed the supposed oppressor, but you also killed the victim. So
Yeah,
you're not
like
doing anybody any good
it's
here.
totally disgusting. I don't care if Texas thinks that's legal or not, or did think it was legal. It's disgusting. And then on the other hand, like you shouldn't be killing all these people
Yes.
to get at the one person who has major disgusting flaws. So okay, he's a polygamist, which that's not in the Bible. So and he's the only person hooking up with everyone. Is he hooking up with like other guys' wives in the cult?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And
yeah,
what
there
they're cool
was
with
a
that?
David Tip- No, like there were certain individuals definitely struggled and grappled with this far more than others. But yeah, it was strange because he must have had the most silver tongue because or something else was playing out psychologically as
Right.
far as some sort of manipulation technique playing out because um, it's very strange how he was able to convince these husbands that were, of high stature in society, very wealthy and prominent defense attorneys. I mean, Harvard graduates of all walks of life, African Americans,
Right.
were a part of the group, which I think is a very strange dynamic, considering just like kind of just the perspective on the Branch Davidians alone. I think it's
Right.
kind of important to spotlight that as being a realistic aspect of
Equal
the
opportunity
Davidians.
and diverse down in Mount Carmel.
Yeah, right. Very strange. Which, by the way, I do find it very interesting, and I won't get too much into the kind of like the woo-woo spiritual nature of things, but it does almost always boil down to some strange symbolic aspect of things playing out, which it's like Mount Carmel, Palestine, Texas is right next to it. There's so
David's
much of
Koresh
this
name
doomsday
itself
prophecy.
was his name itself was like from King David and
Yeah.
what
That's what I mean.
it wasn't like Koresh like some sort of translation of like Titus or something, which was like an
Oh
ancient
man,
like
Cyrus
the
or
original
something.
like good goy or something, I think.
Yeah.
dude,
Yeah, it's crazy.
nuts.
Because people
So
don't
he-
realize Koresh, that's not even his real name. I'm
No.
sure some people know that. But like,
Exactly.
what was his name?
Yeah.
Something Vincent or something?
Biblical Cyrus, by the way, but no, it was Vernon Howell, right?
Vernon
yeah.
Howell. It sounds like a cult leader. That name sounds like a cult
Oh, yeah.
leader.
Absolutely.
He could have stuck with it.
No, it's so crazy to me because it was Vernon Wayne Howell. It was his original
Yeah.
name, and of course the whole situation. If you study kind of many of these, and I won't take it all the way to this kind of conclusion yet. And even in this sort of context, I don't think we have enough time to even provide enough detail to kind of get to this very strange alternative theory that could have played out. But you study a lot of these patsies, right, who are essentially kind of manufactured personalities placed onto this very strange path of the patsy, and they share all the same hallmarks, and your pattern recognition is just,
Yeah.
going off,
Right.
right? And you just witness that they're visiting all these Iron Curtain countries, and at the height of the Soviet, the Cold War, And you know, almost the same exact thing as a John David Chapman or a Mark David Chapman, I mean, or a Lee Harvey Oswald, obviously, or
And Koresh made the
you know,
trip, didn't he? Isn't that what you're getting at?
Koresh made the
Yeah.
trip.
Yeah, he kissed the
You
wall,
can call
doggy.
it a pilgrimage, but hey,
That's how
what
we
are
got the new
talking
name.
about here?
That's how we got the new
You know?
name. That's crazy. But he did, right? He went over to Israel, I believe, came back,
Absolutely.
and did he change his name afterwards?
He
Or
changed his name.
change his name
Yeah,
afterwards?
He
was
consulted the
given-
council.
So you're
given
telling me
he
Mossad did
he was
Waco?
shown the
Is that what
sacred
Jose is
knowledge,
saying?
You know, yeah. It feels like he was introduced to the sacred knowledge, the vanguards, you know, potentially the vanguards and the caretakers of the true history, allegedly revealed to him.
Did-
All that that he could then utilize for his own, which apparently you listen to the actual members of the group, didn't really possess this charismatic ability until he returned, which that alone could
That's
be just a
interesting.
part of some sort of way to reinforce this larger than life caricature of
Mhm.
David Koresh. But you listen to how he would convince people about the seven seals of Revelation, and which is really what he was attempting to present allegedly to these groups, where internationally you had all walks of the theological doctrine as well would be present and represented at Mount Carmel just to study his teachings.
Really?
And that alone really kind of caused me, just at least it gave me pause, especially considering all the special forces that were present during the final catastrophic outcome.
Who were the people?
uh,
Do you know who the people were visiting? Like, were they, fringe sects of certain religions, or were they like?
Oh no, they were legitimate authorities. Yeah, biblical scholars, theological experts, priests, rabbis from all around the world had even been flying into Waco as far as just to study the teachings of the seven seals, and that was all after David Koresh and Steve Schneider had been traveling the world to talk to these various religious leaders, who then flocked to Mount Carmel. So allegedly, yeah, but it's biblical scholars and rabbis and members of
That's
apparently
interesting.
they came to this seminary school. They said that, for example, this is an insane story, that apparently David Koresh came to their seminary school, these individuals, or their synagogue, right? And then he would essentially sit down with them with the Bible and teach them more about the scripture within an hour than they had learned in the past 2 or 3 years at their school or houses of study and worship. This was what they would
Do you
consistently
think?
claim.
Do you think he's hiding the polygamy aspect? Because I feel like certain theologians would come by and be like, I mean, he's saying things that are interesting, but he's living a certain like super hypocritical life that goes against it. I wonder if they even saw it.
I mean, I'm no biblical scholar, but I mean, polygamy is pretty common in a lot of different sects, and it is in the Bible. So I mean, I'm not even Christian particularly. So
I don't think
I do think there's a religious angle people can take. For it,
Yeah,
probably.
it's in the Old Testament for sure. I don't think the New Testament.
You know what he
The New
convinced
Testament
them
forbids it.
is he convinced them that this form of polygamy, specifically that they practiced within the Branch Davidians, was that it wasn't, of course, the goal was not about having sex. That, yeah. That
So
he
now you sound
always
like
had a
Elon Musk.
goal.
Oh boy.
Exactly. A focus, and that was to have children. So yes,
Right.
it was about insemination.
Okay.
And so he wanted to have as many kids as possible. Now, hey, man, you guys stick with me. I know we don't have enough time to create the conceptual alternative theory, but imagine. I'm talking about Nazi breeding experiments for MK Ultra purposes, Manchurian candidates. Like, we have legitimate evidence that you can tie to certain things of that nature, which wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility. As much as anyone who's aware of Waco, please don't take that like consideration, and of course as some sort of offense to the victims. Like, in no way. I think we should just remain open-minded to a more of a
Right.
more of a plausible explanation to what could potentially have been taking place in regard to this scandal and how it effectively played out.
It's
That's
not
interesting.
uncommon for the powers that be that hide in the absurd. I'm not saying
sure.
I don't think. I
Exactly.
mean, I think you probably agree, Austin. I don't know. Me and you probably don't think I've dug enough into Waco to come in some of the solid conclusions, some of the more wackier stuff. But there's definitely credence to it, and and
Absolutely.
from our studying and many of the other things out there in the world, in this realm of thinking and how wacky some of them can get. And it's almost like they do try often, in fact, to hide in the absurd. So you do kind of have to be prepared for maybe this is complete inverse of what you think
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of these different
Well,
situations.
look at
What if there were demographics that were being specifically targeted due to their, the profile that they fit specifically as
oh
test
wow,
subjects
right,
for some sort of covert operation to sophisticate techniques that you could utilize on the public in mass in many ways
yep.
if you were to. Yeah, I mean, again, it's just it's something you have to inevitably grapple with when you are down these proverbial rabbit
It's like how
holes of investigation.
Charles Manson was an experiment. You know, that whole thing
Exactly.
was created
Exactly.
by the government, and Helter Skelter was like that's like a government accelerationist idea, I believe. I don't think that's really what Charles came up with. So then, oh, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was just laughing. I think you're 100%
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
that's like a
absolutely. I agree.
2-hour thing right there. That's
Yeah.
that's Scientology. It all comes back down to Scientology, in my opinion,
Oh,
and that's
nice.
quite the wormhole to make.
Oh
I don't know if
man,
you've had Dana Duda on, but that comes
no,
all back to the process. Scientology, Charles
interesting.
Manson. It goes way deeper than I think
It
Tom
does.
O'Neill
I
went with
forget.
it. So
I think it was. I don't know if. So I just did Danny Jones' show. I don't think he said this to me on camera, but it was something we were talking about later on. I don't know. I didn't look it up, so I'm just gonna say I believed him, but I don't know if it's true. He said a lot of the remote viewers in the CIA were Scientologists. I don't know if you guys heard that. I
Checks
immediately was
out.
just like, nah, sounds about right. And I was like, I gotta look that up. But I'm like, yeah, something's there. There's a lot of weird connections with Scientology and the
Oh,
government.
no doubt.
So, okay, let's go to the raid. And before we get to the raid, I always think this is weird, and I want to know what you guys think about it. There's an article the day before the raid about, like, I guess they called Koresh the sinful messiah. It was kind of like a hit job on this cult. And then the day after, we get a raid. What's the deal with that? What is your take on this article coming out? And like, I guess it was like a local paper, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually basically the ATF themselves, the feds tried to intervene and keep that article from going public
Oh,
because it
funny.
was going to tip off the Branch Davidians, which allegedly is what forced their hand to go through with the raid itself in the
Hmm.
first place. And so that was interesting to me, right? And because of course, you know, you have this Robert Rodriguez, right? This agent who had essentially infiltrated the Branch Davidians and had been living in a house nearby and was very much against and opposed, allegedly opposed to the raid disastrously playing out due to the fact that he knew that they had prior knowledge
Hmm.
and that they would, respond in kind if they were actually targeted and brutally attacked, which unfortunately was effectively taking place. And of course, what you have to understand is that they could have apprehended David Koresh, which I think is a huge point that
Yeah.
always needs to be made in regard to the Branch Davidian story at Waco, because he's the only person listed on the search warrant and arrest warrants, and had obviously they had originally been manipulatively obtained in the first place.
Yeah.
And so then you also have just considering all the opportunities in the world they had to apprehend Koresh. He had even patterned, he specifically had gone out of his way to pattern his jogging routine to conveniently pass in front of the undercover house in an effort to provide them with exactly the opportunity to apprehend him away from the group without having to cause any real, catastrophic results.
That's
But
crazy. Yeah, he went into town, right? Like, he was like routinely going out of the compound, and they could have done something then, but it seems like they didn't want peaceful resolution.
absolutely. Yeah, and you have the federal agents in charge of leading the raid, right? Which when they were later fired as well. I think it was Charles Sarabin and Philip Chajnacki it's a weird ass name, but
Mhm.
they were essentially kind of like hung out to dry and really kind of really just given the treatment of just retire, and trot off in the sunset of sort of thing, and officials but anyway, it's just crazy to actually realize what's happening in terms of the 75 agents rolling up to Mount Carmel at 9:45 a.m. and jumping out of the cattle cars screaming "Showtime" because it was called Operation Showtime. And in no way did they attempt to serve the warrant. They went directly up to the Alaskan Malamutes or something, I think, were the dogs that they had in the kennel, in front of the Davidian complex, and they just assassinated the dogs in cold blood. And allegedly, the other feds claimed that this gave them the you know the plausible reason to begin firing at the house, at the compound itself, was because they had actually overheard the gunfire of the feds assassinating and targeting the dogs in the kennel. But really, I think that was just an after the fact kind of justification of how it played out. Because again, it's like considered during the litigation process of the trial itself, like what did they lose? They lost a lot of evidence, including the front door of the Branch Davidian complex, which would have, unequivocally proven who fired first. And so that alone is a huge problem as far as the official narrative is concerned. But yeah, so you have instantly the initial plan was apparently to be these group of agents would break through the front door, while the other group, obviously you've seen the videos, they would go up these ladders and take ladders and smash through the windows on the second floor where the women and children were. But yeah, the dog team was the separate group of ATF that were a part of the first few moments of the operation and responsible for the initial shots being fired. But
So they rolled
anyway,
up, shot the dogs first. That was their first thing, to murder the dogs, and then and then it starts from there. So there's just like dead dogs along the border of the front lines of this siege for 50 days. What an insane image. I never knew about the dogs aspect.
oh yeah, they even there was of course a sort of ceasefire that took place as well, because I think the original firefight lasted for about 2 hours. It was over a 2 hour long firefight. And yeah, so you have helicopters swarming the Davidian complex. You have tanks, obviously driving around, fully as far as that was another very interesting aspect of serving the warrant, right? Because you had these aggressive techniques of the Bradley fighting vehicles were equipped with ferret rounds and CS
The
gas
same
grenades.
vehicles McVeigh was using over when he was in Desert Storm. So that's a
Yeah.
key point in his story, is that he brings that up, is that he came over here to Waco. And so if you don't believe the government agent narrative, you believe he was just a right-wing guy, it's like, well, that's going to radicalize you when you go to fight for your country and you come back, and literally the tools of war you use are being used against the people. So I don't know. I could see how that could radicalize someone.
Yep. Oh, we love
no
making
doubt.
things for war and then outlawing them at war, but it's totally fine to use them on American citizens.
Oh, like CS gas?
Oh yeah, that's interesting. That fits into the story, doesn't it? That's insane. Before we get to that, Austin, I heard you say on your guys' show that Koresh told one of the guys that he had like a prophecy of this happening. Do you believe that to be the case, that he actually did have a vision of this?
And that's where I'm more likely to lean into the alternative theory playing out, because it's hard for me to imagine. It's just very difficult for me to subscribe to the belief that he had legitimate, like some sort of foresight,
Right.
yeah, through a spiritual connection like that it's very difficult for me to imagine that as a reality. Although I will say, man, just listening to David Thibodeau, one of the survivors, who was a member of the group, he was convinced. A lot of these people were seemingly convinced, but
Yeah.
again, it's like I'm very much just interested to know what were the sophisticated techniques that David Koresh could potentially have been capable of utilizing for his own benefit within the context of the group. Because I do feel like they still to this day, you either have survivors who entirely condemn David, right, and lean into the idea that yes, he did sexually exploit young people within the group itself, and kind of side with the idea that he was more of a monster than people will kind of like, at least people within the framework of like-minded individuals such as ourselves. Like, we obviously, it's the ultimate takeaway is the injustice that we witnessed. Truly, I think that's what matters most. But we still can't turn a blind eye to the potential reality that David Koresh could have been an evil person,
Oh
and
yeah,
a very manipulative person.
for sure.
And
That's why I
yeah,
started the show by saying like the government's a death cult. There's other death cults, and sometimes they say things are cults and they're not cults, but that's what they do. When we talk about the controversies around the siege, and you brought up the CS, Jose brought up the CS gas. Can we run through some of those things that were going on? So you talked about the dogs being shot. Like what were they doing to these people? Because there's some really depraved things that they were doing in that time frame.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
found what
absolutely.
gunshots and some of or bullet wounds, and some of them were purported to be, them trying to leave the fiery areas. But I'll pass it off to you, Austin. You got
Oh
this
wow.
better than I do.
Yeah, it's just honestly, man, when he consider first of all, he's trying to Koresh himself is trying to give phone interviews and local news media interviews, obviously, because he's trying to essentially just get the message out of what the plight of the Branch Davidians at the time when the original raid took place. And you had these tactical teams arrive, obviously, because 4 ATF agents were killed during that original 2-hour firefight, which that alone, it's very much in the same vein of Ruby Ridge. Like we have blood in the game,
Yeah.
they got one of our own, and they will maximize the sort of the message that they would like to send. And many of the federal agents themselves spoke to that, right? They wanted to
Right.
send a message to the public, that right, any asshole with a bomb kit, like that's what one of the official authorities said, and I believe I even ended my Waco episode with that statement, because he said 5,000 to 1 every officer of the law. That's how they view this. It's a
Yeah.
battle. It's a war waging on within the framework of just the domestic citizenry versus the state.
Yep.
I mean, that's essentially the game being played.
For
And
sure.
and to put it in those terms is fascinating. But anyway, so you have these 4 ATF agents who are murdered, and then you have, of course, 20 more who had sustained some pretty legitimate injuries. And so the ATF, they continue attacking the house until they ran out of ammunition, like straight out of the scene from Predator. Just could
Right.
you imagine just going
It's
through
insane.
every last bullet, knowing who is in that compound? I mean, I don't know how you could sleep at night, but
Right.
after the ATF withdrew, they attempt to establish contact with Paresh and others inside the house. Keep in mind, the local police chief said, "What's wrong? Why can't you just go up there and talk to him?" That's what he keeps asking me. I mean,
Right.
what are you doing here?
Right.
And you are attempting to provoke a result such as this, and they got what they wanted. It. So anyway, as a result of the deaths of these federal agents, of course, the FBI inserts themselves into the operation, and Jeff Jamar, I believe, was the site commander. And by the way, he had been the head of the San Antonio field office, and so this is where you get the hostage rescue teams that had been mobilized to the site. And Richard Rogers himself was very much an interesting individual in context to Waco, because he had been criticized for his actions at Ruby Ridge around 6 months prior to Waco.
Man, oh man.
So
Small club.
he would be the one in charge of the tactical teams, later receiving more criticism for overriding the site commander at Waco in the same way he did at Ruby Ridge, which is a PATCON technique all day long. And that's why there were even PATCON operatives who had infiltrated the hostage negotiation teams at Ruby Ridge.
Oh wow. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
it's
crazy.
crazy.
It's like you're making me think of the was he a sheriff in Vegas during the shooting that then wound up
Oh,
being part
yeah.
of like the
Yep.
fire
The guy
response
that
in
went to
Hawaii?
Maui. Yeah. What the
The
hell is
hell.
that? I know, man. It feels like, what happens. I was just reading about how during the Atlanta child murders, there was the police chief that was actually brought in during that time to kind of oversee the process during the litigation and the trial before the patsy was ever, chosen in my mind, which became Wayne Williams. Well, he had just so happened to be all over the place in every single position where scandals were erupting. You would find him in San Francisco. He was in upstate New York during the process, as far as the Son of Sam murders.
Oh wow.
He was in upstate New York, and then he goes straight down to Atlanta just before the eruption of the Atlanta child murders, which have a direct tie-in to the Process Church again. So, and a military intelligence apparatus that is consistently utilizing a drug trafficking operation. But I won't get into that. It just goes it just goes to show, right? What you're really dealing with. This is a very well established clandestine network that is, I believe, leveraging public perception for their own benefit at every step. So, you know, and I think that this perfectly falls in line because, again, what could they achieve, you know, with some sort of press opportunity such as a Waco, a scandal such as Waco? I mean, it's really the sky's the limit.
They attack the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. They get to sustain this narrative that you're talking about, being like, we're going to go against anyone who's anti-establishment. There's a million reasons that's great for them. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but they sort of use the aftermath of Waco as a leverage in passing the Crime Bill Act of '93. Like, I think that's sort of connected. And with, you know, that's Joe Biden and his cronies back then. I think there's some connection between that bill where they're using it as like, you know, we got these bad guys in this country. We got to take them out.
Was that the one they weren't able to get through and they got through later in OKC? Because
I don't know.
I know there was the anti-terrorism bill.
I think that's another one. The crime bill was in '93, and that's the one where like you see Biden talking about. The video goes around a lot about that one is him saying like we got to get the people off. Basically saying like we got to get these people off the streets for doing crack and stuff. And he's like saying that, but it's like he's talking about his own son. You know, he doesn't realize it yet, perhaps, but it's literally Hunter Biden. But yeah, that's insane. So then we've got these 4 ATF guys who are dead. Now it's like a war. The thing that always was very weird to me. I mean, the whole thing's weird to me, but the really weird stuff is like the psychological operations they were doing on the Davidians. So like, let's talk about screaming rabbits.
Oh my God. It is so crazy to actually go through. They were running mind war techniques from straight out of Aquino's Mind War and the Psychology of Victory. They're using Project Monarch techniques. They really sophisticated ever since the Phoenix Project. And you know, that alone is important, you know, to point out. So I'm glad you brought it up, but also consider that I had mentioned this to Jose the other day that apparently 3 of Bill Clinton's bodyguards during the '92 election campaign were engaged in the Waco operation as officers of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
Shut up.
Did they all die?
So check this out.
Not
only that, out of the 4 BATF officers who were killed in the initial raid on Mount Carmel on February 28th, 1993, 3 of them were the very same former Clinton bodyguards.
No.
So that alone, like, how's that
way.
a coincidence? It's a little bit difficult for me.
That's crazy. No such thing as coincidence, dude.
At this point, it's very difficult for me to actually come to terms with that being possible as far as just, yeah, I don't know. But here, I should get to kind of, again, the really torture techniques they were utilizing that would become.
Yeah, it's like Guantanamo Bay, you know? It's like what they do.
Abu Ghraib.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's Abu Ghraib. Yeah, it's straight up the enhanced interrogation techniques that they sophisticated over time. And they were really just testing them out on a domestic compound of American citizens. I mean, that's really what happened.
It's their favorite specimen. They hate us. They hate us. They love doing this stuff. Is there audio or video of the rabbits sound?
I think there is.
Yeah, I've actually heard, yes. And also there's a CIA document that surfaced as well that goes to show what they were actually attempting to utilize on the Davidians. It's a DOD intel agencies look at Russian mind control technology.
Great.
And yeah, FBI considered testing on David Koresh. So federal law enforcement officials considered testing a Russian scientist's acoustic mind control device on cultist David Koresh a few weeks before the fiery conflagration that killed the Branch
Wow.
Davidian leader and more than 70 of his followers in Waco, Texas.
That's
And
insane.
this
What's even
is
nuts
so
is they sent back and said we don't need it. They's already mind controlled, so we're good.
Right.
yeah, exactly.
Roger that. That's
Those-
so
those
crazy.
That's a
Sorry,
joke. That's a joke. To be clear, out there.
Maybe, allegedly.
Yeah, maybe that's a joke. I don't know. Who's
Exactly.
to say? But they were like really messing with them. So they were playing audio of these screaming rabbits. Was there something? Sleep deprivation
was, I think,
Right.
a huge priority. You know, that was, and of course, that was one of the believed solutions through the negotiations that were playing out. That they started like overriding the hostage negotiators who were actually acting in good faith, and then you would have, you know, I believe 2 attorneys were even allowed entry to the house, and when they examined the evidence, they told the group that they had a strong case against the state.
Wow.
And yeah, and so the siege wearing on, obviously you have these 2 factions who were opposing each other at the time. One believing that they could solve this with good faith negotiations, and the other believing we need to implement, you know, force is the only solution. We have to implement these aggressive techniques. And they started by using the sleep deprivation, which was all night broadcasts of audio recordings playing the screams of rabbits being slaughtered and Buddhist chanting, which I found strange.
At the same time,
But
I wonder if they're pumping both those sounds at the same time. That's insane. I mean, either one is insane, but then mixing those, that's some major CIA wet dream stuff right there.
true. Exactly. And you know, you consider the fact that when they were allegedly in good faith negotiations to begin with, they had negotiated a shipment of milk for the children, which was still in the house. But it was in the house when the FBI quickly cut the phone lines to shut off all water and power to the house. And that was due to the fact that they believed that David actually speaking to local, you know, news media would actually kind of create some sort of sympathy for the Branch Davidians, and they refused to allow that to take place.
Wow.
And so they instantly that's the pretext they used to cut off all electric and power to the house. And that was just after they had negotiated this shipment of milk to the children, which was still in the house when they shut off the power,
Wow.
which caused that very same milk to spoil. And so these are the mind games that are playing out, you know, as far as serving to the negotiators' point of undercutting their ability to act in good faith, which is obviously what happened. And then you have the negotiators, they had managed to facilitate the release of 19 children, along with a number of old women as well, these elderly women who had immediately been separated from the children. And then they were charged with conspiracy to murder government agents and placed into 5-point chains and jumpsuits. I found this crazy. You
The
can
women?
look at the pictures. They trot them out to show them off to the Branch Davidians who are still in the compound. And the feds proceeded to force these women to stand out in front of the Davidians' home, calling for them to come out.
Wow.
And I mean,
Wow.
they sent a video camera into the house, the FBI did. I think that was in the first week. And that was supposed to show that there were no hostages and that people were staying inside on their own free will. And so the group, that is that infamous videotape of Koresh and you know, the remaining victims before they all perished, obviously. But so yeah, the video.
That's
it
the
would
one with the little
include-
girl saying, "Please don't kill us," right?
Yeah, please don't
Yeah.
kill us. Yeah, man.
Hmm.
Yeah, my God.
What a nightmare.
And yeah, it really like it. I was I rewatched some of that the other day before we did our Waco episode, Jose, and yeah, it tugs at your heartstrings, my brother. There's
Yeah.
a reason this was a red pill for me.
Yeah. It's hard to
You
believe
know?
it happened here. You know, it looks like something that doesn't happen here. I'm like, that is exactly what happens here. You know, no one's safe, and they'll find any way to destroy you if you go against, you know, them. It's really terrifying. So then the fire, that's the big question. What happens? Everyone's seen do we have the image of that? Is that even possible? Like the fire is a crazy image of this place. So I'm pulling it up right now for people to see who just haven't seen it. So this is the complex, and the fire broke out. So can you guys walk us through like what caused this now? Do
I mean,
we
they kind of
know?
made the
Man.
perfect little chimney here and then blew it up. But Austin, I'll pass it
Like
up
a
to you.
pot-belly stove is what they claimed was
Shoot.
essentially how it was staged.
My
Yeah, that it
goodness.
was just ready and waiting for a spark. That
Wow.
was how it was described. But I mean, by the way, it's very important to realize the fact that David and the group repeatedly denied the fact that they had any plan for mass suicide. But that didn't stop the FBI from making a public claim that the group might commit mass suicide, like what had happened in 1978 at Jonestown.
Right. Right.
Which, if you know what happened at Jonestown, that ain't no mass suicide. And
Right.
these allegedly, obviously these doomsday cults. Yeah, we should take a second look, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, so David Koresh makes a final statement to the world, and that's when he released that through his attorney. He released a letter talking about writing this final interpretation of the Seven Seals. And that's when he promised that he and the group would actually exit the compound upon its completion. But anyway, within the FBI, they're growing more and more frustrated, and the 51-day siege comes to obviously an end early in the morning on April 19th, after the FBI hostage rescue team had their recommendations to mount a full tactical assault on the compound approved by Attorney General Janet Reno.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, Reno, she told Bill Clinton at the time that the FBI hostage rescue team was tired of waiting and that the standoff was costing over $1 million per week. She also cited false claims made by the hostage rescue team that child sexual abuse and mass suicide were imminent, although the HRT would later officially deny making that claim. But, I think Janet Reno herself even later on made the statement that she was willing, if she didn't receive some sort of support. I forgot what the context was, but she made the claim that she was willing to blow the lid off of what truly happened at Waco. And I found that very interesting, especially considering the Wiltshire report that I discovered recently, but and the intelligence aspect of many of those claims. But anyway, but of course, shortly before the Waco showdown, right, you have the International Chemical Weapons Convention Treaty, which Jim Bovard from the Libertarian Institute, he pointed this out. I found it very important to consider as well, because this is kind of the loophole that government agents will exploit to their own benefit, and also to kind of gain the ability to use these domestic these military weapons of war domestically, obviously, is what's truly happening on their own citizens. And so that's how these government officials, they signed an International Chemical Weapons Convention Treaty, which pledged to never use nerve agents, mustard gas, or other compounds, including tear gas, against enemy soldiers. But there was a loophole permitting governments, as far as within the treaty, permitting governments to gas their own people. And so, April 19th, 93, that is when the FBI pumped CS gas and methyl chloride, a potentially lethal flammable combination, into the Davidians' residence for 6 hours, disregarding explicit warnings that CS gas should not be used indoors. All of that played out perfectly in terms of the context of Patty Hearst and the huge major shootout between the SLA and the LAPD in Los Angeles. What happened to that house? It went up in flames, dude. It went up basically the same exact way that the Waco house goes, or the Waco compound.
I never thought of
goes
those
up.
two together.
And they utilized the same exact strategy. So that strategic outcome was already on the record as being.
It's worth mentioning too, just a quick aside with the Patty Hearst SLA thing. Obviously, that's a huge rabbit hole, but
Yeah.
take my word for it. It was one of the most glorious things you ever did see. Like pretty much, it was basically a made-up little militia by a bunch of glowies that it was mostly kind of seemed made up. It's from looking from the inside out, kind of like a very much screams of an intel operation. And this was during a peak Operation Chaos. So this is Colonel Westbrook was like pretty much confirmed, was like directing these
Phoenix.
people. So it was a Phoenix program asset.
Phoenix,
So,
yeah.
Patty Hearst.
And a Green Beret that likely may have been one of the Green. I believe he was just 2 years prior training in the same grounds as Jonestown. So because that was a CIA, it was like a government land before then, and then they sold it off to to the Jonestown people.
Angolan
Yep.
rebels were being trained by the CIA in this CIA black site, which became the People's Temple Agricultural Project in the jungle of Guyana,
I
which
mean,
is so
yeah,
absolutely
we
Just
were
literally training
also
Green Berets there.
we were also funding Pol Pot, under Carter. We were sending
Right.
lots of money to Pol Pot. Oh yeah, Patty Hearst. I was going to say she grew up she lived across the river from where I grew up. Never saw her in my life, but allegedly she lived with like her security guard. Because she was just keep falling in love with whoever was watching after her. Very strange
They
story.
set up a pipeline. That same Phoenix operative comes back. He's called back for domestic operations, for chaos, basically for the hyper operational Operation Chaos that was
Yep.
playing out at the time. And what do? They task him with setting up a pipeline at, first of all, um, presenting himself as a legitimate. He's posing as an actual professor at UC Berkeley, setting up a pipeline to Vacaville, right? The institution in California that housed none other than Charles Manson and was a huge part of the MK Ultra operation that was playing out, utilizing this institution to obviously as a test ground. And so
Yeah.
you had this pipeline set up by this Phoenix operative, Colston Westbrook, posing as a professor at UC Berkeley, who is then providing, this pipeline to the Vacaville institution, which is conducting these MK Ultra experiments. Well, none other than Patty Hearst is caught up in the pipeline and was visiting Donald Cinque DeFries at the Vacaville institution, where he was receiving his MK Ultra, as far as just
They want
how they were
you.
kind of manipulating his mind.
They want you to
And
sound crazy and look crazy
Yep.
making these connections, but these connections are very important. Like,
Yeah.
I really don't believe in coincidences at all. Like I think a lot of this stuff is, people will be like, well, you don't believe the government's, they can't do anything. I'm like, that's the government we know about. That is dumb.
Yeah.
This ignorant, dumb government. There is a thing much deeper, much more nefarious, very sinister happening behind the curtain that's doing a lot of this stuff, that's got like this widespread network of evil. That's like what we're talking about. It's very separate from the government that we're criticizing as being inept.
I think it's key to recall or to remember when it comes to the government, or understand, I guess, when it comes to the government. My show started as more like libertarian theory and the like, so I
Right.
definitely have come to the conclusion that, hey, this thing's evil, this is awful,
Right.
blah blah blah. It's like a whole other level. But I also did work, as active duty military for like over a decade, so like I saw it from the inside how inept the government is. So like there's libertarian theory of like how inept, and you're like, oh, the government doesn't work, it's inefficient, blah blah, and that is true. But there's a dark inverse of this, and that like for intelligent evil people, or I guess maybe not even evil might not be the right word, because sometimes there may not even be evil motivations depending on what we're talking about, but I do think the incentives do drive it that way, that there are going to be people who learn how to utilize such an inept system to their benefit.
100%.
Because with such a benefit, if you are with such an inept system, if you are an intelligent person willing to play the silly bureaucratic games, you can actually go quite far. It doesn't breed competent people, but if you come to the table with this sort of entity with competency in place and a certain agenda, you can make things happen.
Right. So you're like in that sense, the incompetence is the veil that some of these more sinister actors use. That's insane. Before we move on from Waco, did we miss anything you want to touch on before we go on to another topic?
I mean, I really think that obviously it's important to understand that what essentially happened as far as just the fire development analysis provided by this report to the Deputy Attorney General, that it's just important that people understand kind of how this did play out with the Abrams tanks, and 20% of the building
Crazy.
being essentially just collapsing atop its residence as well, right? Which is essentially what happened, because, by the way, the FBI loudspeakers all the while were endlessly broadcasting, "This is not an assault," as they committed the final assault on the Davidian compound, which is just amazing because, of course, like, you consider the gas attack. There was, of course, the use of the gas and the way it was injected by the FBI. There was a chemistry professor who testified to Congress in '95, and he said that the FBI gas attack probably suffocated the children early on and may have converted their poorly ventilated bunker into an area similar to one of the gas chambers used by the Nazis at Auschwitz. So,
Sheesh.
That was
Insane.
actually said within the context of the congressional testimony. So,
And seeing as
but
how
yeah,
we hired lots of Nazis,
mm,
perhaps,
exactly. Yeah,
perhaps.
and obviously you look into Paperclip and Gladio and the rat lines.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
you start to question your reality a little bit
Oh
more.
yeah. Oh
People
yeah.
forget when it comes to Gladio that a key component there is that it was like they worked with neo Nazis like hand in hand because a lot of these were a lot of people forget that like Nazism was kind of a big force that came into power in opposition to communism. So
Right.
Gladio, the whole concept behind it was, oh, we're going to prevent communism from spreading.
Right.
Who are your natural allies? They're going to be these neo-Nazi groups that are still kind of existing. And then it kind of makes sense too that it's not that crazy. Like, hey, you'd help out some of these Nazis escape and do this and do that, curry
Yeah.
some favor with your new group, you know?
Yep.
So
That's the opposite of us, the Americans working with Stalin over Hitler, and we flipped that, just a little bit afterwards. It's so crazy.
Well, someone in the chat, just to bring this up, someone said they could have just come out. It was only an assault because they fought back. And if the abuse of children was occurring, then the government needed to do something. What do you think about that?
Murder them all? I don't think that's
Yeah.
really the sound.
But why didn't they
I'd
just
like
come
to
out?
understand
speaks for
what
itself.
Why
Yeah,
was there such a fight?
I think that the way that it was described by the Davidians who witnessed the original assault, the feds fired first. No one actually revealed who they were. They were only in all black. All that you could see, the actual, acknowledgement of the agency that they were representing is only on their backs. So all you see coming toward you are men in black, mercenaries. That's what you see. And so just imagine being the victim in the Davidian complex. Now, I don't know how else you would react upon federal agents driving up fully armed and assassinating your dogs in their kennel
We
right
should,
outside the front door.
Austin.
And
Should
yeah,
we say also? I mean, because I got an answer to that question as well. But like, the Davidians were being told by Koresh that the government was like the Satan, right?
oh, absolutely.
So like these
Yeah.
people rolling up after being told by Koresh that you are literally being attacked by a satanic government, they've been like, they're
Primed.
fooling, they're
This was
totally
a
primed to
prophecy.
fight
Yeah,
what they
this
think
was
is the enemy.
100%.
And then my answer to that would be like, if Koresh is really hurting children, which he sounds like he was, then they should have got him all the times he was outside. There's definitely no reason to go hurt or kill all those people just to take care of Koresh, especially if he's outside constantly. Like I know that he went out into town a few times. I didn't even know about what you were saying, Austin, with the running by the flop house or whatever. So that would be like my thought there.
Do you think they knew that all those people were in there?
I think they had major
Yeah,
intel, and there was
absolutely.
undercover.
Undercover.
Rodriguez
Yeah.
was the undercover agent who had infiltrated the Davidian group was in there the morning of the raid.
Yeah.
He was talking to Koresh when
Could have arrested him
Koresh
then.
told him.
Right.
Yeah,
Could have arrested him then.
right then.
Yeah, I think
And-
it was
and,
beyond them wanting to just take out Koresh. Like me personally, he's got to go because he's hurting children.
Yeah,
I don't even want
fine.
the state to kill him though. Like I want to just throw him away, right? I don't think the state should have the right to kill anybody.
Yeah.
But they went about this in like a really crazy, like, I mean, Austin, you were referencing their ideas of wanting to experiment with psyops on these people. Like they had an opportunity here to do something way more sinister on a group of people. And it seems like they were more interested in the group of people, despite, the epic flaws, the disgusting, depraved things that Koresh was doing.
Reminds us a little of Guyana, right, Austin? Like it reminds me of the White Knights. I was just thinking about that earlier about how they were
White Knight.
primed. He had this element of prophecy,
Yeah.
and the same idea as the White Knights with the Jonestown cult and how
Everyone at the
they were
pavilion.
preparing for it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
100%, buddy. And that is to your point, Shane. Like it is very important to understand the fact that they were all the members of the group were primed and ready for this doomsday, to occur inevitably. And so it was strange that, according to David Thibodeau, right, the one of the surviving victims, he said that obviously, basically, what he told, this is so crazy because Thibodeau claimed that he had been convinced by David, right, that he was up shingling a roof of the larger house when David Koresh looked at him and said, "Thibodeau, what are you going to do 6 months from now when there are tanks running up and down the Double E Ranch Road?" And he looked at him and said, "David, I don't care what your message is. This is America. They're never going to bring tanks on this property.
Yeah,
He
it's crazy.
reportedly did the same thing with Kathy Schroeder, another member, when he looked at her and he said, Kathy, what are you going to do when helicopters are buzzing this building? She responded, David, there's never going to be helicopters on this property. I just think, like,
In response to that, I was curious. I was thinking about this while you were saying that. Those people, do you think those people, those survivors, those two survivors in particular, are still supportive of Koresh and that idea of what he was building?
Thibodeau is. I know
So-
David Thibodeau is for sure.
So you
At
could
least
say
from,
then, like, those survivors want to, like, maintain some image of him being like this real, like, Messiah, right, or a prophet. Whereas I think you mentioned earlier that there were almost like, I guess, a schism within the Davidians, and there's other Davidians who don't agree with Koresh. I wonder if you even know, like, what they say about things like that with, you know, what his
Are
prophecies.
you trying to get into the Wizard Wars, Shane? Is that what you're trying to get
If
into?
there are Wizard Wars, I would like very much to get into those. Yes.
It's such a crazy story what happened with George Roden, who was like the original, the son of basically the woman who seemingly groomed Koresh in a way, or Koresh was,
Like what?
it's a
Something like
strange
40
dynamic.
years plus older or some shit? Something
Like
crazy.
70.
Yeah.
He's
That's
in
right.
his early
Yeah, that's
30s or
crazy. That's a
late
crazy
20s.
story.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
But you have a lot of the older members, though.
Mm.
They're claiming that when, as I had mentioned earlier, I kind of alluded to the fact that they had really said he didn't share these kind of charismatic characteristics or traits that he seemingly developed after his pilgrimage. But they were saying that when Vernon Howell first came to Mount Carmel in '81, he didn't appear to even be that bright. He had previously been a carpenter, which falls perfectly into obviously the Jesus narrative, right? And was good at fixing things, but also had a stutter and lacked social skills, and was definitely not expected to possess leadership qualities in any way. And so after this pilgrimage to Israel, he returned claiming to have been shown a new, deeper knowledge of the scripture, granting him the understanding and ability to interpret and teach the seven seals. But it's strange because, again, it's like you have these, you have these original members who they very much believe, like, as far as the schism that occurred, and I believe the Branch Davidians originated in 1955, and it was from the shepherd's rod, or the rod of the or the yeah, or the rod. So it was the shepherd's rod or the rod, I think is how it's referred to.
Okay.
And but the Davidians is how they basically became this offshoot of the worldwide Seventh-day Adventist Church. But apparently, according to even Thibodeau himself, one of the surviving victims, he's like, we did never refer to ourselves as Branch Davidians. Like, I only discovered that term. It was introduced to me on the media whenever
funny.
the coverage was happening of the actual siege.
Hmm.
And so yeah, you have this interesting component of, like, how the Davidians were founded in 1929 by this individual named Victor Hotef, who was the president and prophet, but he was allegedly excommunicated from the Seventh-day Adventists for promoting a heretical doctrine. And so you have this report from the Christian Research Institute, and this group was headquartered at a property known as Mount Carmel Center near Waco, and they claim that as far as, like, it had reached its peak as far as membership around the 1950s, right? Early 1950s. But this is when it began to splinter into various factions after Hotef's death in 55. So this is interesting because there's a core ideology that's in regard to its foundation. And the Davidians' belief system was this prophecy of an imminent apocalypse involving the second coming of Jesus Christ and the defeat of the evil armies of Babylon. And so the center itself was named Mount Carmel after a mountain in Israel mentioned in Joshua 19:26 in the Old Testament. So none of it is by accident as far as how it kind of formed. But by 59, you have Victor's widow, Florence Hotef, and she announced that the expected Armageddon was about to take place. But after the failure of this prophecy, control of Mount Carmel Center would fall to Benjamin Roden, the founder of the Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventist Association, known as Branch Davidians. So he was the one who would originally promote a slightly different doctrinal belief than those of the original Davidian organization. But it was when his death occurred that Lois Roden, his wife and widow, took control of the center, and so that's where things begin to kind of you get the introduction of Vernon Wayne Howell
Mm-hmm.
and her son, Lois Roden's son, George Roden, who was considered, to be the original prophet as far as he was supposed to assume the position of prophet. But instead, she decided she would groom another young man by the name of Vernon Howell to be her successor, and that is, of course, David Koresh. But Vernon chose the name David in order to include himself in the lineage, linking him directly to the biblical King David, as Jose had mentioned, from who the new Savior would descend. But this is also connected to the throne of David, which Jesus obviously would occupy after he returned in Armageddon and the rapture.
Mm.
But so apparently the last name Koresh, this kind of blew me away because it's kind of like this esoteric connection to the Kabbalah. There's always some sort of weird spiritual context and that's playing out that seems to be a part of this underlying narrative that most people really don't at least aren't overexposed enough to even be able to kind of acknowledge it and conceptualize it. But it's strange because Koresh itself, there's an extensive backstory apparently, and Koresh was chosen because it is the biblical name of Cyrus the Great for his first heavenly insight. Vernon was reminded of Cyrus, king of Persia, mentioned prominently in Isaiah 45. Babylon conquered Israel in 586 BC and took many Jews into captivity. But when Cyrus and his Persian army defeated the Babylonians 47 years later, they freed the Jews, returned them to their homeland, and with the Persian king's own money, rebuilt the temple there. Cyrus is described in Isaiah as a Messiah of God, meaning one appointed by the Lord to provide a special service. Several messiahs are mentioned in the Bible, but Cyrus is the only Gentile so designated. So Vernon Howell was informed that he was this name. He was the same, or he was the same Cyrus. So he was a reincarnation, right? It's very much a part of the OTS framework as well, kind of the secret society aspect of how these reconstructed prophets continue to reemerge on this
Scientology as well.
generational timeline. Yeah, truly. It really is. But the Order of the Solar Temple played deeply into this, as far as like
I think
Joseph
Kabbalah
Lemambro.
believes in reincarnation too, but I might be wrong on that one. But go on.
I'm not sure.
It's fascinating stuff, but to understand that obviously, Cyrus, whose name in Hebrew is Peresh, right? It makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So Vernon, he took this as his name, and like his biblical namesake, David Koresh his role as a prophet would be to rescue the righteous from Babylon.
Right. And he called the government Babylon, right?
Yes, he did. Yeah. And he would consistently claim that, they would be, the Davidians themselves would be used as the example, right? As far as the modern Babylon would play out, the war would play out. It would come to them, essentially, is what he consistently would tell the Davidians in the group. And so they were very much primed and ready for this to take place. It was just a matter of time.
Well, before we move on, I would be remiss, I think, if I didn't ask you to tell the story I heard you tell about a grave robbing story on the Davidian compound. Am I right? Didn't that happen with the older
That's the Wizard Wars?
right? Okay, that's
it is the craziest
so what?
Story.
Yeah, what happened there?
So yeah, you have obviously you have this individual named George Roden, who once discovering this individual, like you pull him up and honestly, it's kind of strange just as far as the way this plays out, because allegedly there was a lot of like cooking methamphetamine on the property at a certain point that was happening at George Roden's house. So it's kind of interesting that because he originally was the owner of the property, but George Roden obviously was the successor to his mother, Lois Roden, who had become president of the Davidians in 78.
Right.
But that was just directly after Benjamin Roden had died, his father, her husband. But it's interesting because George felt that his position of leadership was threatened and deeply offended by David Koresh's relationship with his mother because obviously, I mean, come on, he's having sex with a 70-plus-year-old woman and he's I believe 28 at the time, if I
Talk about
remember
the burden
correctly.
of sex.
Yeah, exactly. It's very strange how
Terrible.
this kind of played out to begin with, and again, it seemed like some sort of now maybe he was strategically positioning himself to hopefully potentially gain access to the property.
Hmm.
That's possible,
Right.
but yeah, it could have just also been that he was essentially groomed by this woman in a way, which is very possible in many ways, and so but still he files a lawsuit in federal court, this George Roden, and he alleges that Koresh had raped Lois and brainwashed her into turning against him. So that's what he claimed that Koresh did to his own mother.
Wow.
And so in 84 or 85, there's a fire at Mount Carmel, the administration building, and it destroyed $500,000 of apparently of their property and of but again, this is the administration building at the out Mount Carmel, and so Roden claimed that Koresh was the one who started this fire, but Koresh was already claiming that the judgment of God was playing out, which is kind of hilarious. So he says that no man set this fire, and that Roden, claiming to have the support of the majority of the cult, forced Koresh and his group off the property at gunpoint. So obviously, a further splinter as far as the
A little
you
bit.
had what was that?
I said a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. But this individual, Charles Joseph Pace, moved out of Mount Carmel Center and set up home in Gadsden, Alabama. So you're already having individuals kind of splinter off from the group whenever this was happening. And so Koresh, he takes about 25 followers and settles in Palestine, Texas. Roden renames Mount Carmel Rodenville. And in a videotaped interview, Roden led a tour of Rodenville using an M1 carbine as a pointer and declared it's basically a holy jihad.
Oh man.
Khomeini versus Israel. That's what Vernon Howell has with me.
Whoa.
It's
Epic.
such a crazy story.
Epic.
So, Roden, apparently resentful of Koresh's power over the Branch Davidians, had challenged Koresh, saying that whoever could resurrect the dead was the true leader. So this happens when, in October of 1987, he decides to dig up a corpse that was buried on the Branch Davidian property and claim that he's going to, resurrect this corpse, and that if whoever is, the true prophet will be able to win this challenge. And so it's so crazy, man. Roden told the press that he had exhumed this body only because he had been moving the community cemetery. So that was his claim.
Yeah.
But while Roden prayed over the body of Anna Hughes, who had apparently died 2 decades earlier, Koresh reported George Roden to the McLennan County Sheriff's Office for corpse abuse. So that alone was kind of like a hilarious strategic play by Koresh himself.
Seriously.
Who gets presented with this challenge and then just calls up the authorities, and it's like, hey man, this guy's abusing corpses.
This false prophet
Go
and this
check that
corpse
out.
abuse. Oh my goodness.
So the police, they tell Koresh at the time that he needs evidence to back up these allegations, or there's nothing they can really do. They can't like just go onto his property and force their way into any of his. But so this is when you have this strange story play out to its kind of climax, where November 3rd, 87, Koresh and 7 followers returned to Mount Carmel, heavily armed and wearing camouflage. They stealthily entered the compound, allegedly to obtain a photograph. However, they did not bring a camera, but carried weapon and a map of the grounds with positions to occupy. They found Roden crouched behind a tree with an Uzi submachine gun, and a gun battle ensued for several minutes.
Wow.
Roden flees the property with wounds to his hand and chest. Koresh's companions were found not guilty after a 2-week trial for attempted murder in Waco, and a mistrial was declared in Koresh's case.
Dude, that's insane. That is
So
Isn't
bizarre.
that crazy?
That's
I
a
mean,
mess.
my God, Koresh inevitably gains access to the property. because he decides that he's going to pay the back taxes for the property and treat it as his own, and so he inevitably just takes control.
Isn't
Wow.
Which was
Roden
really a great play.
isn't Roden the same guy that had a meth lab set up there too or something? So that was the
Yeah.
precedent they used later in order to
Yeah,
essentially make it like a joint task force type operation, I believe.
that's
So
how they got the military. Right, that's how they got the
all the bells and whistles, all the
access
nice
to the
Bradley
military.
vehicles.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
to the MVs. Yeah, exactly. To the Bradleys and the CS
Wow.
gas as well. It was their justification was that this was an active drug nexus, and they could prove that they were cooking methamphetamines
Nice.
on the property.
So then it
Yeah.
gives them more credence to kind of do a smash and grab type deal because it's like, oh, they could flush the drugs. It's like, okay,
When in
Yeah.
reality, the story goes, the report was that once Koresh and the Davidians gained control of the property and moved back, that they essentially cleaned out Roden's old meth lab, and had really just kind of like redesignated it for the group to like run weapons and the militia network at the time, which they were very much a part of the just like they would consistently go to gun shows and try and make some money for the group itself by selling weapons in a legal manner. I mean, they even owned a gun shop. I believe one of the members of the Davidians owned a gun shop, which the feds tried to actually
yeah, they
went
had
to
a
and were
FFL
trying to
dealer, I
question.
believe, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And while they're questioning him, he calls up Koresh and tells him, "Hey, dude, the feds are here. They're what do you want? What do you want me to tell him?" And he's like, "Give him the phone. Let me talk to him." And so, yeah, he gives him the phone, and the federal agents just straight up just start. They were once they obviously discovered that it was David, they just dragged their feet and hung up on him essentially. So they had a goal, and that objective was going to be achieved. And I believe that that was much more than just honestly a justification as far as like some sort of press opportunity. I think it's far more than that. That is a convenient, as far as just a convenient misconception that I think has been manufactured to really throw off public perception as far as their ability to kind of wade through the actual disturbing details that lead to a far more, yeah, really it is. Honestly, it becomes an extraordinary, like paradigm shifting just as far as your ability to try and make sense of this in any sort of right, honest, objective way. You have to kind of pry a little deeper below the surface, and what reveals itself is what we've kind of been alluding to throughout this entire show so far, which has just been this very much more well-established clandestine network that seemingly is, as you put it, the shadow government, or as I said earlier, the permanent establishment.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, their goals are seemingly overlapping
Yep.
and effectively being achieved every step of the way.
And antithetical to our freedoms. So when I hit up Jose initially for this show, I was like, I want to talk about serial killers. And then when we were talking before we went live, when Zoom was trying to take me out, we were talking about how we were going to transition. And like Austin's got a good micro like transition on the ground level of people with the musical chairs of this network. And while we were talking about it, I was thinking like the other like maybe macro transition into this is like the Davidians talking about the satanic government, and now the serial killers that you guys are talking about that are like, I don't know if you're gonna say like procured by the government, like what's a good word to say, manipulated by the government. It makes it sound like they're way more satanic than I even give them credit for, that they're willing to do this.
I'll explain this real quick. I will go ahead and let you know. Like, I don't think there's any way we can really dig into this, but maybe I can give a little bit of teaser of the kind of conceptual idea that we were working with when me and Austin were talking about this idea. The idea of serial killers essentially being created by the government. Most well known is David McGowan's book, Program to Kill, is kind of where this thesis is proposed. And that was kind of what we were going to present to here. It's way too dense of a topic for us to go in too much, but essentially the concept being is the way we were conceptualizing it for this episode. And so maybe you can have Austin back on another time, or maybe both of us, or whatever.
Yeah.
Or maybe a different guest. Like we definitely have no guests who could do a great job with this. But essentially, the idea being is it was I know you remember I'm sure you remember the concept of satanic panic.
Oh yeah.
Well, this was like an inverse of that, because our idea we would totally break down that we think satanic panic, like there were some examples of where things were blown out of proportion or weren't legit or whatever, but I think there was real things going on that were covered up, and essentially this smoke screen of satanic panic kind of covered it up. It's like, oh, that's this hodgepodge, whatever. I feel like the serial killer phenomenon, and honestly, it kind of leads into school shootings and the like, is the same thing, but an inverse of it. It's the real satanic panic in the sense that they say, oh, serial killers, oh, school shootings. And it's like, yes, there are examples here and there of school shootings, of serial killers, maybe too. But I think when you really start digging into different examples, you start to see that many, many times what we were shown to be school shooting or serial killer or whatever was in fact someone who was programmed to kill.
Right. Right.
100%.
I mean, we were talking about Charles Manson earlier. That he was programmed to kill, or programmed to make others, kill.
Yeah,
I guess.
Or it's like cover-ups too, or like I was getting at like the smoke screen idea of like with John Wayne Gacy, like that's probably a great example. Which we would, once again, I'm not trying to go super deep. I know Austin has like probably 40 minutes he could go on just on that angle, but just that right there on his face, just the fact that he was slaughtering so many young boys.
Yeah.
It kind of let just that on its face, and there is other things that other source stuff that we're getting to. That I'm trying to prevent myself going into it so we don't go down this. But there is just that on its face leads you to believe, come on, there's something more going on here. It's like, no. I think there's something else going on.
Do you think some of these are like just lab-made serial killers, like MK Ultra, just like when you say programmed to kill that way, or are there serial killers that they're watching and just letting do their thing, or both? I guess.
Well, there's variations. There's like when it comes to program to kill thesis, there's the idea of the government creating somewhat organic serial killers, possibly on their own, and just in the fact of being involved in programs like Operation Phoenix, things like that. And then there's a concept of these lessons they learned over in Operation Phoenix that then they apply domestically in things like Operation Chaos, like we went into with Colonel Westbrook and Charles Manson and things alike. And then on top of that, the smokescreen concept, the idea of that some of these could be shown off to be other things. For example, there was a recent FSU shooting. There was two people who were killed in that thing. One of which was the son. He was like 56 years old. He was the 56-year-old, I believe. Somewhere in the 50s. I might have that wrong specifically. But either way, he was like in his 50s, and he was the son of probably what was known to be the most malicious of the Cuban exiles, the infamous Cuban exiles. His name was Monkey Morales. So, I mean, I don't know. But once again, I'm not saying this could have been just, and the kid, too, had some like mental health issues. So this could have been just a legit shooting. But it's one of those things where just on its face, it's another like pattern recognition thing where you're like, what the hell is going on here?
I heard you say before that the Cuban exile thing that shows up in other places. Like you've seen that pattern. Like
Operation 40 with JFK, RFK assassination. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I mean, Austin could go on about that, but I mean, really, I think you guys say this really is like the more you pick at this, the more you're like, are you ready for another hour and a half? Let's do it.
That's how it goes. They make you, like I said, they make you sound crazy for putting these things together, but these things are happening clearly. So where you take this theory, like are there things you've seen other than John Wayne Gacy, other killers that you are like way deep? We can go into like one of those. We have time if you want to peel apart one. Yeah.
Sorry, Mika.
I got you. Like again, it is exactly what Jose was just kind of like staging and introducing as far as the conversation we were having earlier. Because in my mind, and this is how I presented the Finders Cult. I believe it was that was how I conceptualized it at the time, was essentially, explaining how the mass hysteria was truly spurred on, right? So the satanic panic, in my mind, you have the rise of the serial killer phenomenon, really kind of coming into its own in the late 70s, early 80s, right? And so you
the golden
sort of
era,
have like really early 70s and yeah. And so essentially that spurs the satanic panic that then it, obviously is ushered through directly after with all of these, which in my mind, you have this manufactured misconception that's playing out, right? That was essentially, in my mind, it was manufactured to conveniently, as far as the satanic panic itself, that concept, it was a conveniently constructed concept to excuse and oversimplify this mass hysteria that was truly, in my mind, a natural reaction from true corroborated evidence of satanic ritual abuse. Now, I'm coming to terms with different ideas as far as like why exactly satanic ritual abuse is being is kind of like a recurring pattern that I consistently like at least I tug on this thread, and in every single one of these aspects of like these cases that we're considering talking about, like let's say a David Berkowitz, right, or a, as he mentioned, John Wayne Gacy. I think Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole are a great example as well, because you have again this insane, again, it's like what I'm trying to, it's very much in the vein of Program to Kill and Dave McGowan, right? The standard profile of these serial killers being lone nuts, driven only by their infatuation with violence and sadistic abuse and murder. When in reality, it seems like a lot of the evidence surrounding these high profile cases, there are insane parallels as far as just the it never seemingly like falls perfectly into place as far as the background of most of these individuals seems like it's been manufactured. And
Right.
so they inevitably take the fall, and it's and become a patsy in this context. But what I want to really kind of start by explaining, I think, which is most important, because again, we it's difficult to say where to begin, but since we've been discussing Waco, right, I think it's kind of important to at the very least make this interesting side, which I had discovered there's this ritualistic murder of Arliss Perry, which had been written about in Maury Terry's book, The Ultimate Evil. And this woman was actually targeted and ritualistically murdered on the campus of UC Berkeley, right? And it's one of the most unique stories as far as what actually happened to Arliss Perry, and the interesting way that they discovered her body. She's this 19-year-old newlywed who had recently moved to Stanford, but she's from North Dakota. And this all falls perfectly in place with the Interstate 9094 killings, which had been traced by this former New York police detective named Detective Jim Rothstein. And he really was brought in by a criminal informant when he was working in upstate New York, who tipped him off about mass graves in Untermeyer Park, which is what brought him into the Son of Sam,
Right.
which is the key case that really he then followed and realized that it branched all throughout the domestic U.S. and that there was truly a network where a lot of these alleged serial killers and sociopathic murderers and especially child abusers, they all kind of fell within this framework of this clandestine organization that seems to be resurfacing all over the domestic U.S., surrounding these extraordinary scandals like the Son of Sam, like let's say even Charles Manson, which was 6 months after the Fort Bragg murders, and Dr. Jeffrey McDonald, which mirrored the Manson murders, right? Or vice versa. The Fort Bragg murders were 6 months after the Manson murders, but still, it could be just some sort of copycat crime, or when you look into the actual details of it, it truly does kind of expose the reality of far more of a well-established operation being covered up by federal entities and compromised assets on the ground operational level. But the point being is that Arliss Perry, she's essentially tied back to being targeted by this organization, this very same organization that had been conducting targeted assassinations by using David Berkowitz's group, to commit certain killings that would be very much, let's say, convenient for the cover up, which was occurring at the time. So if you consider the Son of Sam murders, right, you have to again keep in mind that this is very interesting. That as far as like, well, I should at least say that David Berkowitz, obviously known as the Son of Sam, 44 caliber killer, he's technically been labeled as the lone gunman, right?
Right.
The lone murdering serial killer psychopath that was obviously terrorizing New York in the 70s, and just a few years, and then he's actually convicted, right, arrested on August 10th in 77. But still, to consider the hysteria that surrounded the Son of Sam murders and kind of how it was utilized in the public framework, you begin to kind of, yeah, it, again, gives you extraordinary pause, especially considering the victim list you go through, and you discover that Donna Loria and Jody Valenti, who were victims in the Bronx in 76, well, they had been directly tied to, obviously, Donna Loria. She had been an ambulance technician who might have become aware of a drug ring involving Nugan Bank that imported Golden Triangle heroin into the U.S. through blood supplies that she was apparently
Sheesh.
involved with. So she could very well have been potentially blowing the whistle at the time, and she has much more sinister connections as well to the group. But you you know, again, it's hard to kind of figure out where we should begin because it was interesting. I was not at all prepared to talk about Waco, but we did it on the fly, brother. We
You
made
killed
it
it.
happen.
You killed it.
I just thought that was hilarious. But still, considering like the level of research that we've done on like a Mark Dutroux and right, I mean, I made up a list that's pretty extraordinary. You know, you can really, I think, one of the best ways to kind of make the point is to at least really just spotlight what Phoenix was and the techniques they utilized, and then kind of at the very least, we can pry into a little bit of Matthew Charles Lamb and the Psychopath Machine and MK Ultra being leveraged as far as utilized through the Montreal experiments, which very much seem to have where you have sociopaths who fit a profile and they're essentially targeted and recruited to these institutions like the Oak Ridge facility in Canada. And then they essentially practice these Phoenix and Project Monarch techniques as well on these, these sociopaths, while also providing a test subject that is not a sociopath to see the impact that the sociopath can have on the average person. It's very interesting what was being conducted at Oak Ridge. But first, you have to consider again the chief aspect of the Phoenix program, which allegedly was just a collection of intelligence information for the Viet Cong, right, at the time. But in reality, there were a lot of special laws that kind of were created surrounding the Phoenix program that allowed for targeted assassinations and things of that nature, which again, you have to consider the enterprise, right? The overall enterprise playing out with a lot that's happening in terms of these serial killers who inevitably, I think, are kind of becoming the Patsy Fall guy for a much wider network. And essentially, their low-hanging fruit, let's say, they're procurers for an operation that then get hung out to dry, which very much happens often. I think David Berkowitz fits that perfectly to a T. So does Wayne Williams of the Atlanta child murders. He very much was a part of. He was recruiting young children, in Atlanta at the time as a talent spotter, who claimed that essentially he had this Gemini group that he was recruiting these young kids to be a part of, and he was claiming that he would essentially put them on the path to stardom and celebrity. He would help, create their image, and then he would take this Gemini group to a local production studio in Atlanta that was run by Michael Thevis, and this production studio just so happened to be owned by this individual, Michael Thevis, who happened to be child pornography kingpin in Atlanta at the time, and and apparently there were two government officials who had gone to a party with Wayne Williams, the alleged perpetrator, the lone perpetrator, and had offered him, if he had ever gotten caught, they offered to provide him with a defense attorney, which happened to be the very same exact defense attorney that was the defense attorney for Michael Thevis, the child pornography kingpin.
My goodness.
And so he was taking the members of this Gemini group, these boys, these young children that he was recruiting, to that very same studio where they were producing child pornography and snuff films. So that's a reality, right?
Wow.
And it's fascinating. Go ahead, Shane.
No,
sorry,
I'm just blown away. I mean, I'm surprised but not surprised. We hear these stories all the time, and it's just like, you want to believe it's just like, oh, okay, it just happens here, and like hopefully that evil has been taken care of. But I think it's unfortunately it's quite widespread, and there's a vast network that takes advantage of children, and it's freaking
absolutely
nightmarish. It's terrible.
It is. It's something that, and to me, when I covered because I covered the process church as well of the final judgment, and in terms of the Son of Sam case, because that was really my brutal introduction to the process. And that was when I kind of I covered Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole, and I realized that there were these claims, and this is in the vein of the Dave McGowan Program to Kill, which I think is very valuable, and each and every one, as far as I encourage everyone to
Yeah, I got to read it.
at least, yeah, you've got to read it, and at least to kind of introduce that just as a plausible reality. It's definitely a possibility. At the very least, remain open-minded. But the claim that really kind of stuck out to me, and again, it came back up later on when I covered or maybe it was before, when I covered James Holmes and the Aurora, Colorado shooting, and Dr. Robert Duncan, the Harvard graduate who wrote Cyber and Cybernetics Revealed. It's an insane book about how essentially they've modernized and sophisticated these mind control techniques to such an extent to where, they're utilizing EMF and post hypnotic suggestion far more often than a microchip.
Yeah.
Because it's actually far more, reliable.
Yeah.
And I found that fascinating stuff, that they could essentially just, and by the way, they can program you with subliminals using EMF while you're asleep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a possible reality. And so, I believe cybernetics is apparently where the modern war, on the human mind wages on. It's kind of fascinating stuff. But again, this U.S. Navy psychologist, he claims that the Office of Naval Intelligence had taken convicted murderers from military prisons, used behavioral modification techniques on them, and then relocated them in American embassies throughout the world. The Navy psychologist was Lieutenant Commander Thomas Narut of the U.S. Regional Medical Center in Naples, Italy. He divulges this information at an Oslo NATO conference of 120 psychologists from the 11-nation alliance. He says the Navy provided all the funding necessary. Dr. Narut, in a question and answer session with reporters from many nations, revealed how the Navy was secretly programming large numbers of assassins. He said that the men he had worked with for the Navy were being prepared for commando-type operations, as well as covert operations in U.S. embassies worldwide. He described the men who went through his program as hitmen and assassins who could kill on command. Careful screening of the subjects was accomplished by Navy psychologists through the military records, and many were convicted murderers serving military prison sentences. And the Ionia State Mental Hospital in Michigan was later exposed as being one of the many facilities complicit in the CIA's human behavioral modification research program. And it was obviously serial killer Henry Lee Lucas, who was largely considered to have been one of many criminally insane patients who were unknowingly forced into the CIA's brutal experimentation while he was admitted at Ionia before being paroled in 1970 and killing at least 2 women before his final arrest in 83. It gets so crazy because he's actually, I didn't realize, he was housed in the same place that Charles Manson was. And I found that out earlier, actually, because I always knew about Ionia, but I wasn't unaware. I had no actual understanding that apparently he had a direct connection to actually being present at the same facility as Charles Manson for a time. But that one is pretty fascinating.
You wonder how it's like the way you're describing it. It reminds me of how the government will, basically take on hackers to then do the hacking for them. Then I think about the Unabomber was allegedly, Ted Kaczynski was allegedly MK Ultra, right? Or something like that. Whitey Ford, I think that's his name. Whitey Ford. Is that the singer or is that the...
Bulger? You mean
Whitey
Bulger?
Bulger, thanks. Yeah, Whitey Ford's the singer. Yeah. I'm going to listen to that now. But he was involved in MK Ultra, I think. There's a lot of people who've done a lot of bad things who've been attached to this. And then we talk about Charles Manson a lot today. You read Chaos. You understand his connection to all this. So this idea doesn't seem like very far-fetched. It seems like something that is exactly what they want to do. We talk about MK Ultra creating hitmen. These these people they can just basically on a remote control have to do their bidding. So why not? It's really, and you think about the FBI. There, how many serial killers are they just watching and just letting go about their thing, and then maybe they catch them, be like, okay, well now we need you to do this, or how many are they just dosing with drugs? How many are they hitting with the EMF? I mean, there's just any number of ways.
And how sophisticated is that now? Like where
Oh.
have they gone with that? I know you had BX on before. I'm assuming you probably
Yeah.
covered her digging into like chat rooms and the like, and how they seem to be trying to touch disaffected use that way. So
Right.
I mean, they'd have adapted their methodologies to the modern day too.
Yeah, I was thinking about that while we started this part of the conversation. All the stuff BX is doing, talking about all these satanic cults. Some of them, it's like the satanic stuff might be a front for what they are doing, because some of them might just be accelerationists looking to destroy. But a lot of them, the satanic stuff is going on. It's kind of threaded through a lot of them. But now it's becoming like that's a widespread phenomenon. Now people are starting to talk about outside of just like some of our podcasts, and it's like a really big deal. But we're not really having the satanic panic that we had in like it was the 70s and 80s. I don't know if people care. I feel like because a lot of mainstream America is more satanic now than they were back then.
Are you just like implying like you're not feeling the panic, like people aren't like, oh my, pearl clutching? Because I don't feel that either.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe I'm just in my own little echo chamber, but I'm not feeling that. But I do think we also need to be sort of vigilant when it comes to these things. I don't know. For example, I know I got a little bit of flack for this for some people recently, but like the Virginia Giuffre thing recently, like I saw people immediately jumping on that, like, oh, she didn't kill herself. I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if she didn't. But it's also like if you know her current life story and also the state of the Epstein files in her life, it's also not that crazy. So I do think people need to stick to the truth. And while I'll be honest, I present my bias as being anti-government. I am ultimately trying to aim for the truth. And I think if you do. The times when you miss the mark on the truth, or if you get too overly, too excited about certain narratives and jump on them with not proper logic behind you, I think you can be a thing where it gets to make us look foolish. Like I know a lot of people bring up the Damar Hamlin example. I believe the one guy who had the all the anti-vax, us. I'm not saying in a bad way. I consider myself that, but and like all the people were immediately like, oh, he's dead and this and that, and like I don't know, maybe he did, maybe they did some crazy glowy stuff. I have no idea. But when he came back out later, everyone looked foolish.
We got to go case by case. And the people who I follow on like Twitter who knew Virginia or have written about her, they basically say that she did take her life.
That's what I'm hearing.
So like I see like Ryan Dawson talking about it, and I don't know. It's just we've been kind of conditioned to question suicide, especially when it comes around that story. But yeah, her literal life sounds obviously horrible. So yeah, I wouldn't put it past her.
But people should 100% be looking into murder as an option. Like you'd be retarded if you didn't.
100%. 100%.
Well, it's the same thing with the Arizona story I was
you have to
talking
consider
about
the
too.
idea that it is realistic as far as custody battle. I think that she was going through to some extent was just completely destroying her, I think, in many ways. And then apparently I saw what Ryan said earlier. I mean, it's possible she had a painkiller addiction as well. So man, I've been there. If you're on a slippery slope like that and you've experienced nothing but sadistic abuse in your life and you're traumatized to that extent, and then on top of that, you can't even have a relationship with your children. Now, I'm not saying I have any real understanding as to where she was psychologically at the time. Who knows what happens to you with life experience such as that. But still, yeah. I mean, it's like if you're speaking in certain terms, just be careful. It's like you got to be very careful. In my mind, it's like I think it's a very fun to at the very least consider things that make sense and are very plausible in terms of what you can prove, but at least what kind of just the corroborating evidence that falls into a specific pattern. That's something that I do point to often, but it's just out of like trying to put together the puzzle pieces for myself to create a conceptual outline that I can kind of rely on that seems like it is at the very least founded and like the foundation of it is all structured around the idea of objectively pursuing the truth in the most honest way I possibly can. And yeah, reflecting on the things I get wrong and reminding myself again, when you're speaking in certain terms, to be very careful, because I do think the ultimate consequences of a lot of these things that we discuss, I mean, the consequences of being wrong, I mean, that's very impactful.
Yeah, and I get it, because Twitter is fun and it's fun to shoot from the hip. but sometimes you like, I wonder, like, am I helping amplify a certain message that they want me to amplify? Like when we're talking about Waco and how all the media, echoes the same thing. Are you helping to do this quick, you're going to ride this wave for like the weekend, push this story, and then to connect her death to what we were just talking about with the EMF stuff. It's like, I'll question it from every angle. Did she kill herself? Was she murdered? Was she driven to kill herself? Like with the EMF, because they've got psychological operations going on people. Who knows? And she's such a high profile victim of this insane case. Anything's possible. We know these people we're talking about are capable of anything. But also, we know how dark the human soul can be. And
I'd say no matter what, they killed her. Like no matter whether she killed herself or not, they
for
killed
sure.
her. So,
like her suicide is if it was a suicide, it's a result of everything they put her through.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, horrible. Well, let's end it there, guys. That was a fun one. That was a dark way to end it, but I feel like that fits.
Yeah.
Please, I'm not even going to attempt to find any joy because it's just this time of year. Like I was looking at the Ruby Ridge stuff, or just like there seems to be a lot of things that happen this time of year. I don't know what that's about. Spring. I love this time of year, but I love spring. I love Easter. But the government seems to be the antithesis to all that beauty, and all they are is destruction and ugliness. So on that note,
the time of the harvest, Shane.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Let everyone know, guys, where they can find you, where they can watch all your stuff.
I have the No Way Jose show. Me and Austin do a weekly show together on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Already Dead. It's a call-in show. It's the best call-in show there is. No, just obviously that's a joke. I'm just playing. We're on a call-in show right now.
It is.
But go check that out. Tuesdays 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We do a call in the second half of the show. We try to get guests when we can. But also I have the No Way Jose show. I have I do regular interviews, and then also I do a morning show called The Morning Dump every morning. Monday through Friday, at usually about 10 a.m. Eastern is the time I usually go. But kind of depending on what I can do. But the thing I'm probably most known for is my Oklahoma City playlist. So go check that out. Go hit up my playlist on YouTube. That's probably the best place to start. Yeah. Go to the playlist. I mean, me and Austin's done a Jonestown series. I mean, we're getting ready to do Tro series. Me and Austin have done a score of series together. There's a bunch of different shows and series and pretty much in there any topic you can think of. But I'll pass it off to Austin now. Here you go.
All right. And thanks for having us on, Shane. Honestly, I appreciate you guys for having us. And I don't know. I know I went pretty schizo on you guys, but it makes a little more sense to I don't know, at least for me personally, give me like one or two subjects or even three that can hopefully balance them a little better in my own, just for me personally, because it's so hilarious. My attempt at, like, I was trying to figure out which example do I want to use when we were going into this.
There's a reason I was going, I don't think we should bite this one off. I know, Austin, we're going to be here for 3 more hours.
We're going to do a part 2. Awesome. We got to have Austin back, and we'll do a part 2.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate you, man. But just thank you for sure for the opportunity. I'm forever grateful, and nothing but love for you guys. And you guys, best place to find me is the Underclass podcast. That's really my solo project, where we also use it as the umbrella project for both Jose and I. Whenever we collaborate, we put out on both of our platforms. But the Underclass podcast for sure, and it's basically on all platforms. Also, the best place to support me, patreon.com/the Underclass podcast. And I do have an incentive in place for the Patreon. At even the lowest tier, you'll gain access to my paywalled content with Brad Binkley and Sam Tripoli for whatever this is.
Sick.
Whatever this is, which is a lot of fucking fun, man. I love Sam to death.
Yep.
And of course, the Tuesday Already Dead every Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time with the homie Jose. And we
6:30 Pacific, Austin, 9:30 Eastern.
Oh yeah.
Shit, you're right. My bad. Hey man. But anyway, I appreciate you guys again, and I don't know. I'm spiraling over here on the Atlanta child murders, so I'm gonna come out with an episode here shortly on that. Hopefully by the end of the week, but it's coming out soon.
Sick.
But either way,
well, I'd love to have you back to talk about more of this and that as well.
Awesome.
And Jose, Wednesdays 9/11. you can see.
Oh yeah, how did I not
uh,
mention Tower Gang?
Tower
You
Gang.
give me a perfect little segue when
Yeah.
you go, how do we deal with these dark times? So you know what helps with that? Dark humor.
That's right.
That'll get you through.
That's
Racial
right.
slurs and laughing at things you shouldn't laugh at.
That's right.
That'll get you through it. Just
Tune
being
in.
demented in the head. Every Wednesday at 9/11 Eastern, we have Tower Gang with me, Top Lopsa, Clint Russell, Cole, and Toad. And yeah, we're getting ready. We're gearing up for Bro Grove here in June 20th and 21st in Leesburg at I forget what theater, but one of the theaters. There's a flyer that's going to be out here soon. You can go check that out.
Yep.
But it's going to be a blast. We have Sam Tripoli headlining one of them, and we have Owen Benjamin headlining the other, and then we have, I believe, you're kind of like our
Yep.
all right, what's the word I'm
MC,
looking for?
I
Our
guess.
speaker, not
Yeah.
our speaker,
Opener.
but like our
Yeah.
introductory guy. What the
Yeah.
fuck? There's a term for
An
that. You
opener.
know what I mean?
Host, MC, I don't know,
Yeah,
something like
there,
that.
host,
I'll be
MC,
on
that's the word I was
stage.
looking
I'll be
for,
on
yeah.
stage, and I love all those guys, so I'm stoked for that. Can't wait for that. It'll be good to see everyone in person. But dude, guys, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure, and we will do this again. All right, have a good night.
Bye.
Later.
You too, bud.
Amazing.
If I had known we were talking about Waco so much, I would have brought a Dr. Pepper. Because that's where it's from.
That's
Waco.
right. That's right. You've been to Waco
I've been to Waco. Well,
in
I went,
'93.
No, yeah, right.
Where were you?
No, where were you? I was in third grade. No, but Chris and I went to Waco because we went to see Chip and Joanna Gaines's Magnolia Bakery because we're cool like that. That was all me.
Freaking nerds.
But they have a Dr. Pepper museum.
Do they really?
Yeah, it's dumb,
Oh,
but
wow.
it was cute.
That sounds like just one away from a meth lab. I don't know why.
Oh yeah, it probably
Just
is.
that close
Like,
away.
you know.
That was a fun one. That was a dark one.
It was really dark.
Really dark.
He brought up Arliss Perry, and I was like, "What is that story? Do you know that story?"
No.
Okay, so she was a 19-year-old American newlywed who was murdered inside a church. On the night of her murder, Arliss and her husband Bruce had an argument about their car's tire pressure. So Arliss told her husband that she wanted to pray alone inside the Stanford Memorial Church, and he left. So Bruce became concerned when his wife was not returned home by 3 a.m. and called the Stanford police to report her missing. Around 5 a.m., security guard Stephen Blake Crawford found Arliss's body in the church's east transept near the altar. She was found face up with her hands folded across her chest, and an ice pick was sticking out of her back of her head.
Whoa. Out of the back of her head.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
And it was unsolved for more than 40 years.
Holy crap. That's insane. So I'm sure you said she was newlywed?
Yeah, she was 19.
So I'm sure he was suspect number one.
I don't know. I
For
mean,
a while.
apparently he went home. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy though.
It does sound like he could be the suspect, though.
Well, we'll have to have Austin back to talk more about that.
About murder. We have to
Totally
be careful
insane.
what we say on the show. They're
Why?
gonna I don't know, do something while
Can't
we're
talk
sleeping.
about the news? Oh yeah, well that's bound to happen. You'll be fine.
Okay.
You'll be sitting in this chair. The helicopters will come over my house and abduct me
Oh, okay.
one day. Yeah, non-prepared. I have a bug out
That's why you
bag.
have to be off grid, so they
yeah.
can't find you.
Do we have any comments or anything we should address? I appreciate that one person asking that question.
Yeah, kind of,
about
like a little bit of
Waco.
a pushback. Different.
I agree. I think the whole thing's weird. You know, why they could have definitely just walked out, but considering
it was just a bad plan, she was saying. So
considering what they had been I don't want to say forced to believe because they were like in a cult. They just believed it. That
maybe
the
they were
government
just
was
like,
Babylon. You know,
not that this is okay, but maybe they were just like, we just gotta get rid of all of them because they're cult people.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cults. We're not getting rid of all of them, and they're still around. There, you can look up. There's there's a few different Branch Davidian sects now, doing their thing.
I'm fascinated by cults.
Yeah, I know.
We should have more of that.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot right now happening. We have no idea about, but like the government, is definitely a big one. There's a big one in DC, about an hour and a half away from here. It's the biggest money making cult I can think of.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, well, next week, I have callers for next week, so sorry we don't have callers today. And we'll be back next week with a good guest. I won't announce who yet, but it'll be fun.
Okay.
A good friend of mine. So you can send me stories at Shane Cashman at scanner.com, scnr.com. If you've seen a ghost, if you've experienced some strange alien beings out your window, if you've seen something you just can't explain,
Or if you're in a cult.
Or especially if you're in a cult, hit me up. We'll have you on the show. We'll talk. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see y'all next week.